Welcome to the Pace of San Diego and our continuing series on gender identity. Today's episode is about a transgender woman, Marianne Horton, who has a very unique story to share with us. In the 1950s, the nuclear family consisted of a mother, father, and their children. Those people who identified as LGBTQ hid their true lives in fear of losing their families, jobs, homes, being thrown in jail, or even being forcibly institutionalized. Because at that time, many people thought that gays were mentally ill. Fast forward to the present, and let's have Marianne tell you about her journey in becoming a transgender woman. Welcome to the Pace of San Diego.
Thanks, Marlene. It's great to be here.
Yes. I first knew about you when I saw an article in the paper about you as an author putting out this Trailblazer book, Trailblazer, Lighting the Path for Transgender Equality in Corporate America. You did a lot of lighting the path.
I did.
Didn't you?
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. You were born in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
Mother, father, you were only child, right? And you were assigned a male at birth.
That's right.
And named Mark.
That's right.
Tell us about your family.
My parents were, my father worked for Standard Oil. He drank a lot. My mother was, she was abusive. She physically beat me once a week, whether I needed it or not. So it was a challenging childhood. But I loved school. I loved getting away and putting my nose in a book, and I became a nerd, an academic, and that was a lot of fun.
So you were a regular kid, a regular little boy, right? Had no outward appearance or anything that you were going in a different direction until you were about 9 years old. Tell us what happened when you were 9.
That's right. My mom took me to see The Sound of Music, and there is a wonderful number in there called 16 Going on 17, where Liesl and Rolf are dancing in the gazebo. And Liesl's dress is twirling and doing amazing things, and it had a powerful effect on me. I wanted to be Liesl twirling in that dress. And suddenly I became aware of skirts and women's clothes, and they became very important to me. So I did what every red-blooded American cross-dresser does. I snuck into my mother's room and stole some of her clothes and wore them, and I loved it. It was a very comforting feeling, very, very soothing. So I took those clothes off and left them in a heap on my closet floor, and my mother came in to get my laundry and saw the clothes on the floor. She was not pleased. She beat me within an inch of my life.
Wow.
So I learned I had to hide this.
You did. Did your father know? Did he find out?
She told him, but he pretty much stayed out of it. He was avoiding her, and he was gone a lot drinking.
So at that time, you had no one to talk to, right? I mean, did you talk to any of your schoolmates about this?
Oh no, this was a deep, dark secret. I had to keep it buried very much to myself. I thought I was the only one like this.
So you must have been pretty lonely in that, right?
I was, yes.
And at that time in history, seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist was pretty much a no-no, and people thought you were crazy if you did that. It's not like today. So did you, by any chance, get a chance to seek help?
Not when I was a kid. It
No.
wasn't even on the radar.
Okay. And at that time when you were dressing as a girl, did you want to be a girl physically, or were you happy with yourself and just wanted to dress like that?
I just enjoyed the clothes. For me, it was all about the clothes at that age. I just wanted to wear skirts and slips and hose.
And so now you grow up. How often did you do that? Did your mother know about it later?
She caught me from time to time.
Did she?
And that was a good reason for a beating. But it was, I don't know, whenever I was alone, I had the opportunity and I had the need to dress. Somehow being alone made me feel uncomfortable unless I was wearing women's clothes, and then it was comforting.
So definitely comforting.
Yes.
And now you get into high school, and are you attracted to girls?
In high school, I was attracted only to girls. I wanted a girlfriend just like every other nerdy boy. and I didn't really have any success at that in high school. But I've never been interested in men. That's an important distinction, that people don't change their gender in order to have an acceptable relationship with someone of the same sex. It's way easier to be gay than it is to be trans. But I didn't know that at the time. I thought I was just a boy that wanted a girlfriend and had this need to wear dresses.
Did you have a girlfriend in high school?
Not in high school.
Mm-hmm.
No, I've met my first real serious girlfriend was Karen that I met my second year of college, and we got to be a serious couple.
Where did you go to college, by the way?
I went to college at USC.
Okay.
And we met at USC. She was from Ohio, and we were a long-term couple together for the last 2 years of college, and we got engaged, and I came out to her before we got married, and I told her I need to wear dresses sometimes. Mm-hmm. And she looked at me and said, "Oh no, you can't do that. I knew a guy once who did that. He was weird. Really? You can't wear women's clothes." And I said, okay, and I threw everything away because I didn't know any better. I thought I could stop.
Mm-hmm. So you had 2 sons, right?
After graduation, we moved to Ohio. We had 2 sons,
mm-hmm.
and we had a normal, typical suburban life. The house, the cars, the kids, the whole bit. And
you were hiding still?
The need had come back, and I had a stash of, I was beginning to get a stash of clothes. I came out of the bedroom to the living room wearing her dress and said sort of jokingly, "So are we ready to go?" And she was really mad. She said, "How dare you steal my clothes?" And this turned into, she realized this was a need in me. So she told me that I had to go get counseling and get cured. Mm. So I went to the Open Door Clinic in Columbus, mm-hmm. and they tried to do therapy to get me to not need to cross-dress anymore. And I can tell you that ex-gay therapy doesn't work, and ex-trans therapy doesn't work either.
What did they do in that therapy?
The whole idea was to motivate me, to give me willpower that in order to preserve my marriage, I needed to not cross-dress.
I see.
It was all about willpower, and it lasted about 2 years before the need started to come back again.
So then you went towards your career. And tell us a little bit about, you eventually got, am I jumping the gun here? You eventually got your PhD in computer science?
That's right. I got my PhD in 1981 from UC Berkeley in computer science. That was a very exciting time to be at Berkeley because Berkeley
Yes.
Unix was happening then. And Berkeley Unix turned into all kinds of wonderful things. It turned into Sun Microsystems. It turned into Cisco routers. It turned into the Linux operating system. And being a part of that on the ground floor was really exciting.
So what was happening with your career at that time?
So after Berkeley, I got a job with Bell Labs in Columbus, Ohio. And we moved out there. I was working with networking, so email was starting to be a thing. And I found myself leading an email network, helping people get their email from one place to another place, and also leading one of the early social media networks. It was called Usenet. And it was very exciting. We could post something, and within a day, it would be on computers all around the country.
My.
It was grouped by topics, so today you would call that a forum. Mm-hmm. But in 1981, this was a very exciting new social media thing, and only certain techies could get on it because only certain techies had the kind of computer that could use it.
So you were married, you were living a normal life, and you were doing very, very well in your career. And what happened at that time?
Well, my career was going well, but my need to cross-dress was coming back stronger and stronger mm-hmm. as well. So I was beginning to collect a small stash of clothes, and my wife was going to school to be an EMT, become a paramedic. So one night she was off studying with her friend at her friend's house, and I had a new skirt and a new wig, and I wanted to try them on after I'd put the kids to bed. Mm-hmm. So I put the kids to bed, and I was trying on the skirt and the wig and looking in the mirror in the bathroom, and her headlights came in the driveway. So I was scared, and I ran real quickly back to my home office and tried to do a quick change. Didn't quite make it. She came in and caught me. She saw the pile of
Pile of clothes on the floor,
the
huh?
pile of clothes on the floor,
Wow.
and she left in a huff. And I wrestled with what to do because I knew she was mad at me. And I wound up a few weeks later going to a conference in Phoenix, and I decided to spend a day as a woman because it was a burning need.
This
I
was
had
your
to find out-
chance, huh?
This was my chance to find out what it would be like to spend the entire day dressed entirely as a woman. So I got a makeover, I bought some clothes, and I spent the entire day as a woman. I was working on a book at the time, so I worked on the book, I had dinner, I went to a movie, and at the end of the day, I took off all the clothes, washed off the makeup, and I asked myself, was this the rush that I was expecting? Was this the exciting thing that I wanted it to be, the sense of euphoria? And the word that came to mind for my experience with the day was boring. And I figured, okay, well, this means this is not for me. But what I discovered years later was that I'd chosen the wrong word. The right word would be relaxing. And I was much more relaxed as a woman. But it took me a long time to figure that out.
It must be very difficult to hide who you really are, what you really want to be. You know, I admire you for going through this, figuring it out slowly. And then what happened after that?
Well, it was a very slow process. I purged and threw everything away for 6 months, went through a divorce with my wife, very painful, full custody battle, lasted quite a while. But I met another woman named Beth at work, and we started to date. And after 6 months, I told her that the need to cross-dress was starting to come back. So she didn't say a word. She went into her bedroom, came out with a manila envelope. She had seen on Donahue a show about cross-dressers and written away for literature. And she'd gotten literature from an organization called the Society for the Second Self, also known as Tri-S. And this was a national sorority for cross-dressers. And it was a very loving act of hers to order this material and to save it for me just in case I would ever need it. So when I was ready, I contacted Tri-S and got in touch with them. They invited me to their meetings in Cleveland. That was a 2-hour drive away. So Beth helped me get all made up, all dressed up, and we drove to Cleveland, and I got to spend a few precious hours as a woman socializing with other cross-dressers.
She was amazing.
Beth was wonderful.
Very much.
Very loving. She was very accepting of the cross-dressing. She said, well, it's only clothes.
Otherwise, you had a fine relationship, right?
We had a great relationship.
And you had gained custody of your sons?
Yes, after a full-on custody battle, the judge awarded me custody of my sons. I was honest about being a cross-dresser, and that was the difference, was my honesty.
That was amazing that the judge did that. in
I was
those
very
days.
surprised. He was a
Yes.
retired judge, very conservative, and he still granted me custody because the team of psychologists said I was more open and honest and able to be the better parent.
Right.
And that was a very wonderful, affirming statement.
So you're joined Tri-S, but you still haven't come out as a woman.
I was very closeted, very
Yes.
closeted. We formed a group in Columbus after several months called the Crystal Club, and then I didn't have to drive to Cleveland anymore. So I was one of the founders of the Crystal Club. We met once a month in a church, Unitarian church, and we got to spend some time as women. There were both cross-dressers and transsexuals in the Crystal Club, and I identified firmly as a cross-dresser. I was very closeted. I didn't tell anyone except my wife, but sometimes we would go out together and I would be Marianne. And we would go out to dinner, for example, Beth and I. So I spent more and more time as Marianne, and I got to be more comfortable as Marianne. It became sort of a part of my life.
So when did she start to be uncomfortable with that?
Well, that was later. I came out in the workplace in 1997. I got involved with an organization called Equal, which was Lucent Technologies. By then, Bell Labs had become AT&T, and it had become Lucent Technologies. So got involved with Equal because they were there for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender workers. I was the first transgender person who contacted them, so they taught me about gay and lesbian, and I taught them about transgender. And I learned the power of coming out at work for gay and lesbian people. They didn't have to spend energy hiding part of who they were, and so their productivity increased. Right. And I wanted my productivity to increase and to come out too. So I didn't dare come out at work because the equal employment opportunity policy at Lucent protected sexual orientation, but it didn't say anything about transgender people. So I asked through channels, would it be possible to add language to Lucent's EEO policy for transgender people? And months later, a message came back through those same mysterious channels asking, well, if we did add transgender language to our EEO policy, what language should we use to be as inclusive as possible? Well, that was a great question to hear. And I didn't know the answer, but I was starting to become an activist. I had lots of contacts. So I asked through my contacts, and the language that came back was gender identity, characteristics, or expression. That would protect transsexuals, it would protect intersex people, and it would protect cross-dressers.
So the expression part would protect cross-dressers.
That's right. The gender expression part would apply to me. The gender identity part would apply to transsexuals, and the gender characteristics part would apply to intersex people.
Okay.
So a few months later, October 28, 1997, Rich McGinn signed the new EEO policy, and it included that language, gender identity, characteristics, or expression. That was the first Fortune 500 company to add transgender inclusive language to its EEO policy.
Okay.
Very exciting development. And it gave me permission to come out at work safely.
So is coming out and transitioning the same?
Those are different. Coming out is being honest with people about who you are. It's telling them, I am transgender. And at that time, it was done one person at a time. We didn't have social media where you could announce to lots of people. So I came out to my boss, and then to my coworkers, and then gradually to other people that I worked with. So that's coming out. But I was still part-time. I was spending most of my time as Mark and some of my time as Marianne.
So is transsexual different from transgender?
Yes. Transgender is an umbrella term, and that applies to all people whose gender identity or gender expression is different than their assigned sex at birth.
Right.
Transsexual is a subset of that under the umbrella, and it's a term that refers to people who want to spend all of their life in a gender role different than their assigned sex at birth.
I see.
Today, we use the words trans woman or trans man because transsexual has become a dated word.
Right. So when you say trans woman, it's a woman now that was a male at one time.
Correct.
And yeah.
That's correct. Trans woman is kind of short for transgender woman. Easier to say.
So what were the steps that you had to go through to eventually come out as a woman?
To come out, first I had to be safe at work to get the policy passed. And then I talked to my boss one-on-one, came out to him. It was very hard to do. He was great. He shoved a box of Kleenex across the desk for me to cry into. And he said it was okay. Then the next day we had a group meeting at work, and I came out to my group. And the day after that, I came back to work as Marianne, and they all got to meet me as Marianne.
And how were they?
They were great.
Very accepting?
They were wonderful. Everybody was great at Lucent.
Because they had been prepped to know what you were doing, right?
I'd shared with it ahead of time so that they wouldn't be surprised. Surprising people is kind of a bad idea.
And at the same time, you were telling other companies about this, right? You were doing the same kind of work.
Well, once I got that policy changed at Lucent, I went to a conference called Out and Equal, which is Out and Equal Workplace Associates.
Okay.
And that is a group that's the same idea as Equal, but it covers lots and lots of Fortune 500 companies. So a who's who of companies would attend these conferences: bank employees and tech employees, drug companies, retailers, all kinds of tech companies. There were lots of large companies there. Any company big enough to have a diversity group and to have diversity organizations for LGBT people were there. So I went to the Out and Equal conference in Rochester in 1999, and I shared what was going on with Lucent, and they were very excited. I encouraged them to do the same thing in their companies, and I told them how I did it. So the next year, Apple came to, I helped Apple get the wording in their policy, and a few years later, the ball started rolling. We got Chase and IBM and Xerox doing it. American Airlines added it to their policy, and it started to be a trend.
So you had made this happen. That's amazing.
I started it. I was pushing the snowball up the hill, and eventually we got to the top, and the snowball rolled down the hill on its own.
So then you went further with your transitioning, right?
At some point, the tech bubble burst in 2001. I was looking for work as Mark, and I wanted to look for work as Marianne. So I was sitting out with a glass of wine with my wife in the backyard, and I was telling her, I would really like to look for work as Marianne. And she said, well, if you were a woman all the time instead of just when it's convenient for you, I would be more impressed. And I thought, well, maybe it's okay to transition. And then she said, but you know, I never signed up to be married to a woman. And I still wanted to transition. So I transitioned to full time, and she's a straight woman. She didn't want to be married to a woman, so we wound up splitting up, but it was an amicable divorce this time.
Okay. You went through some tough times.
I've been through a lot.
You really did, yes. So then what happened?
So then I started taking social steps and legal steps and medical steps to become a woman.
What social steps did you take?
So the social steps were that all the time I dressed as a woman, presented as a woman, used my name Marianne, used the pronouns she, hers, she, her, and ma'am. And I didn't present as Mark anymore. I took my Mark clothes and I threw them away.
Okay.
And I took some medical steps. I needed to get all that pesky hair removed from my face. So many people do full facial electrolysis for this. I took a shortcut. I used laser hair removal, and that was very painful, but it was over with very quickly. In 45 minutes, they could go over my whole face.
Wow.
And my face was plaid for a while because of all the singeing. But after 4 passes of my face with laser, most of the hair was gone, and I could do touch-up with electrolysis. I started hormones so that I would try to grow boobs, and that was a very slow process. I eventually wound up getting implants.
I understand that some of that never works for the people, right?
Sometimes hormones work, sometimes they don't. It depends on your genes, it depends on your age when you start.
Okay.
I grew a little bit, but I got tired of wearing falsies all the time.
Right.
So I eventually wound up getting implants done. I also took legal steps. I legally changed my name. I legally changed my gender marker on my driver's license.
And that's important, isn't it?
The driver's license is very important because that's the credential that allows you to use the right restroom.
Okay, so if somebody says to you, what are you doing in here? You show them your driver's license and you are known as a female now.
Now that's true.
Yeah.
There was a time when I had an M on my driver's license, and I was accosted in the women's room by mall cops who didn't want me in the women's restroom. They took me into custody, and this was a young mall cop. He said he was on his 6th day in the job, and he felt very important that he'd been able to arrest someone for using the wrong restroom. And I could have been in a lot of trouble. It's in Ohio, it's a misdemeanor, it's an M1 misdemeanor to use the wrong restroom, and that could have resulted in 6 months in jail.
Yeah.
So he called the Columbus police, and the police saw that I had a clean record and said, there's no reason to arrest you, but I'll escort you off the property. So he escorted me off the property, and I breathed a big sigh of relief.
So today, it's very timely what's happening with the restrooms, and maybe we should ask you about that now. What do
Sure.
you think should be done for transgender using restrooms?
Well, look at me. If I used the men's room, there would be quite a stir. If it makes sense for a person to use the restroom matching their current presentation. And that's always been my policy. Use the restroom that matches the current presentation because that passes the principle of least astonishment. The law in California says that trans people can use whichever restroom they feel most comfortable in. I also want the people around me to be comfortable, so I'm going to use the women's restroom. I wait in line like everybody else. Nobody raises an eyebrow. I'm always totally accepted in the women's restroom.
And then to keep us up to date, you have a new love. Tell us about Katie.
So Katie and I met here in San Diego in a North County women's social group, and she was attracted to me. I was attracted to her. We almost didn't get together, but we went on a date, and I asked her permission to date her, and she said, well, I thought we were already dating. So we became an item. We've been together for over 10 years now, and we got married a year and a half ago.
Oh, nice.
And she's wonderful. She is so great for me.
That is
we're
perfect.
living in Poway. We're living in paradise. I'm very, very happy with my life now.
And you lived happily ever after.
We're living happily ever
Except
after.
you wrote this beautiful book on transgender equality in corporate America. And I loved it. It was just a very interesting book. And there's a lot in that book that we didn't talk about today, of course, you know. I want to thank you so much, Marianne, for coming here.
Thank you, Marlene. It's
being
been a pleasure.
on our show. It's wonderful. You know, it's not up to us to judge how others should live their own lives. People have different perceptions about what makes them happy, just as we do. Being true to yourself is the message I hope we all take away from this show. Marianne went through unbelievable discrimination until she finally and fortunately arrived at her own happy comfort zone. I hope we can all find our own beautiful and happy place in life. I'm Marlene Levitt. Thank you so much for watching The Pace of San Diego.
If you'd like to find out more,
About joining our group here at Pace TV,
please go to our website.
www.pace-tv.com.
It's never too late to have fun.
Learning a new skill.
Thanks for tuning in.